mandatory sentencing and mandatory sentencing and mass incarceration in the United States have torn apart families. They've literally ripped moms and dads from the embraces of their children. They've destroyed whole communities by removing able-bodied men and women from the workforce, crippling the very economic life forces within these neighborhoods. And at what price? According to a Brookings Institute research conducted in 2014, they found that the annual price for incarceration is a staggering $80 billion a year. That, folks, is an entirely too high a price to pay. Since the 1970s, strict mandatory guidelines have reduced our court's ability to remain flexible, preventing judges from using their discretion, leading us as Americans to have the highest percentage of prison population. We have more people behind bars than any other nation in the world, which leads to overcrowding in jails. And with 76.6% of inmates who are released today finding themselves back behind bars within 5 years, we also have the highest recidivism rate within the whole world, which tells you that prisons don't work. And it's time that we as a country demand real alternatives to mass incarceration. What I'd like to do is have you consider one key step that must be taken before we can look at alternatives. The first thing we've got to do is remove mandatory sentencing guidelines and allow judges and courts to make decisions based on the individual circumstances of each case, to look at the defendant and to look at what caused the crime to occur. So instead of throwing the book at them, maybe it's time for us to throw that book out and find a new one. Once we do that, we can look at alternatives to incarceration. Around the world, many nations have considered using drug courts and mental health courts to tackle the root of the problem. If you consider the fact that 75% of inmates who are behind bars suffer from drug addiction, that tells you that we're only treating the symptom. We need to treat the illness, and drug courts and mental health courts will be able to do just that and allow for successful transition back into society. Another option would be intensive supervisory probation. Unlike traditional probation, each officer handles fewer cases, fewer probationers. Each officer will be able to be more hands-on, meet with the probationer on a more regular basis and help counsel them. ISP probationers are allowed to stay in their community, so they stay connected to their family, they stay connected to work. And consider this, the average cost of housing a prisoner is $28 a day nationally, $28 a day. In Muskogee County, it's $50 a day versus $10 a day for an inmate to be on probation. Okay, so drug courts, ISP programs, and finally, restorative justice. Restorative justice is designed to repair the harm and damage and bring about a healing process to those impacted by that very crime. Sentencing circles are created with representatives from courts, the victim, the offender, and community members. They all come together and agree on a sentence that allows them to repair the damage and make the whole community whole once again. So, after 27 years, with 20 years, we've seen an increase in spending for corrections rise by 127%. We've also seen a greater portion of our population placed behind bars, even though violent crimes have actually decreased significantly during that time period. That means that we are actually housing more and more nonviolent offenders and technical violators, people who may have simply missed an appointment with their probation officers. So, drug courts, ISP, restorative justice programs, these are just a few of the solutions that many nations have tried successfully. And I say that it's time for us to bring our brothers and sisters out from behind prison walls and return them to their families and their communities. It's time to heal. It is time to eliminate mandatory sentencing and begin to use real solutions and end mass incarceration in America.